The images we've been working with so far have been JPEGs. However, there are a few other common file types to be familiar with in Photoshop. If I was to save this file that has 2 layers in it as a JPEG, Photoshop would flatten it so that there would be no layers in the JPEG when I open it later. JPEGs don't have layers, so to save a file's layer information, when we go to File, Save As, we definitely want to select the default PSD file under Save as Type. Also make sure Layers is checked. Then when we reopen the file later in Photoshop, all the layers will be there. JPEG differs from PSD in another way too. JPEG is a compression technology, so the files are much smaller than PSD files, but there is a risk of JPEG artifacting, particularly when you open and close a JPEG file many times. The way that JPEG compression works is 2 pixels beside each other that might be very close in content, such as hue and so on, might eventually decide to become just one color since they're so close, so eventually the image is degraded because there's less differentiation and some blocky looking artifacting can occur, particularly if you're opening and saving a JPEG multiple times. A few other raster style image formats you might see include BMP, which is a rarer format than JPEG. There's TIFF, as well as GIF or GIF. Unlike JPEG, the GIF format can preserve transparency, so if you had a Photoshop file with a layer and then a checkerboard pattern behind it in the background indicating transparent area, we would go to File, Save for Web, and save it as a GIF so that it would be truly transparent on part of the image. For example, if we were adding an image to a web page. However, unlike JPEGs, GIFs are limited to just 256 colors, so they're better for raster versions of logos, for example, and not photos. GIFs can also be used for animation, hence the animated GIF. However, PNG is replacing the GIFs since it also has transparency, but better quality images than the GIF. PNG also has better transparency with varying levels of transparency compared to the GIF. Finally, 2 more common file types to be aware of include the PDF and RAW file. PDFs can be created by exporting from various Adobe programs such as InDesign, or we could save it here in Photoshop. It's meant more for documents such as letters, brochures, magazine advertisements, and can be helpful when the sender and the receiver of a file don't have Word or another common program to open documents, so both parties can open PDFs since the Adobe Reader is free. However, if we're saving a photo, we shouldn't be saving it as a PDF. We should be saving it as a JPEG, PNG, or the default PSD. Many SLR cameras shoot in 2 modes of saving files, JPEG and RAW. I go over RAW files more in detail in another course, but basically RAW files do not consist of any compressed information, unlike JPEGs, so they are larger files. They'll need to take a little bit longer to record in a camera's CF card, but they allow for a lot more post-production editing since no preset adjustments or compression is done to the file in the camera. Those are common and popular file types to be aware of in Photoshop. Whether or not we can save the document in Photoshop as one of these formats is in part affected by image mode that the file is in. In Photoshop, click on Image and hover over to Mode. And for our purposes here, we need to be familiar with RGB and CMYK. RGB stands for red, green, blue, and is primarily meant for use in files to be displayed on the screen. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, key, or black, and it is meant for print production. Some printers will require the photo files to be saved in CMYK format, but many printers today will accept RGB mode as well, particularly with digital printing. In the next lecture, we'll go over cropping and resizing images in Photoshop.